Hey everyone, One Punch Tano here. The internet's punch, and it's time for a punch of the new Pop 1280 record. Punch! Pop 1280, they are Sacred Bones Records signees who hit me pretty hard on their debut full-length album several years ago, which was this really dark, heavy, kind of industrial noise rock mess of just head-crushing guitars and bass, monstrous, scary drums. It was kind of cacophonous to the point where the band drowned itself out into anonymity, and there wasn't really too much about the record other than its solid songs and some pretty animalistic performances that set itself apart from any other group that's just kind of raising hell on record. Not exactly an original style, I guess I will say, but it was played with guts. But to be completely honest, their next full-length album, it just completely fell through the cracks for me. It's like the band just was not on my radar. But what's funny about sort of missing out on Pop 1280's last album is skipping directly from the debut to this new LP over here, it's like I'm listening to a new band entirely. They went from this sort of faceless, murky, incredibly heavy noise rock to something that's way more synth-driven and gothic and sort of industrial and tortured, depraved, and freakish. The music here is chaotic and it's just brooding. It's like a weird monster chained by its neck to a wall in a torture chamber, and like it's just writhing and thrashing at you. If I was into BDSM, this would be the soundtrack. The record is kind of slow going to start, and it might be to ward off more impatient listeners from partaking in the hellish musical experience that will be coming shortly after the intro. The band delivers this mind-numbing percussion loop, which is kind of off-kilter, and then they swap these moments out with these huge bursts of distorted digital sound. The vocals are kind of campy, but they come off super sinister. It's like I'm listening to the intro song to a really gruesome underground hardcore bloody slasher B horror movie. Like as soon as the just heavy distorted synths bust in, I'm seeing like a blood red title and just like all this dripping goo and ooze coming down the screen. I'm reminded of the Prurient record that came out last year a little bit. I'm reminded in terms of the vocals like of Marilyn Manson or a bit of Nine Inch Nails. I'm reminded of synth punkers like Suicide, of goth rock and death rock bands like Christian Death. And there's something about this record that kind of reminds me of a very demented and violent and dark version of what Liars were doing on their last full-length album. So stylistically and sonically, there's a lot of influences, I think, playing into this album, but I don't know if you need to be an expert on any of them to enjoy what Pop 1280 is doing on this project. All you really need to know is that this thing is dark. It is hellish. The band takes a decidedly more aggressive approach on the next track. It's noisy, it's synth punkish, it's got eyeliner because it's a little goth, and it's from the future, so it's not just synth punk, it's like cyberpunk. The vocal performance is devilish on this track. The dude comes off legitimately like demonic. And behind these vocals we get layer upon layer upon layer of all these like brittle twittering noises, sort of just incessantly just creating all this static over this monstrous bass coming from the synths and the drums. The band is just really just they're just rushing you with every frequency they have. And by the next track, In Silico, it's like the band gets even more intense. It's like they're actively trying to terrorize the listener with the music they're making. Especially given that in the first third of this track, there are all these proclamations coming through the vocals that, "You don't like the way this sounds!" And of course, immediately after that comes a bunch of very brittle, shrill shots of cymbals and just really industrial floor tom drum fills. All the synths, all the drums, all the vocals. There's a lot of sound bleed in this mix, and it's all kind of swirling together into something that's intense and explosive and psychedelic. The song Chlamydia cools it down a little bit on the aggression. I like the track a lot. It's kind of smooth, it's spacey, and it really provides a much needed lull after some very trying and very intense moments just previous to this track. I think it feels like a much needed and a very well crafted interlude, which makes me kind of wonder why the band and the label used it as like a promotional single. As a song by itself, it's kind of underwhelming, but in the grander scheme of the album, it makes a little more sense. Not only does it show a bit of diversity, but it's also the sound of the band pulling me further into the sewage pipe that this album lives in. And not to totally attack the way that this record has been promoted or anything like that. I mean, promoting an album like this to people who might not necessarily be into intense and noisy music is a tough sell. There's not much in the way of tracks on this thing that I could call catchy or accessible in any kind of way, but the song USS ISS does come close. The synth and guitar leads on this thing actually repeat quite often. They're dark, they're powerful, they're catchy, and there's actually a head-bobbing groove to this thing. It doesn't just, sound like it's working to the rhythm of a very violent beating to an innocent person. However, the record just gets weirder from here, like on the track Rain Song. It's kind of drony, sort of ambient. There are all these shocking noises that just kind of pierce the spaces of silence. There's some very distant vocals giving some very creepy performances. It's indulgent, but it's unsettling. But slowing the record down at this point does kind of kill the momentum a little bit, especially with The Last Undertaker. Not a track that I hate, but as we're nearing the close of the record, I just kind of wish there were more, bangers here. But the album does finish off very strong. The track Kingdom Come is easily one of the most intense cuts here, and it feels like the band is playing in this really live, in the moment, fluid way as they're speeding toward the finish of this track and just kind of intensifying more and more as the song goes on. Nothing here mood-wise that wasn't already displayed on the previous cuts, but I guess it's not unwanted since the band has done such a good job of creating a semi-interesting flow to this record. There are definitely peaks and valleys. This thing was an interesting listen, and a record that I see myself coming back to, not only because I think the production is just top-notch, intense, and abrasive, but the vocals have way more character, I think, than they did on the two previous Pop 1280 records. I mean, the vocals are so raw, they're up front, they're just not being given anywhere to hide, and I think the band and this record has benefited a lot from that. If you're looking for a nightmare on record, then check this thing out. I'm feeling a strong 7 to a light 8 on this project. Transition. Have you given this album a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? Would you like me to review another thing? Or would you like me to stop reviewing forever? Let me know what you want me to review next down there in the comments. Smash the like! And have a good day, okay? You the best.